Well, our next transfer portal window, of course, comes right after spring practice on May 1st. So I got to think that it's going to be flooded with Ducks, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, it will have to be, and there's still what about a week left in this window, something like that. I think that's January 18th. So there's
Yep.
time for some more players to enter there. I would kind of surprised no one has entered. Oregon, the way their academic calendar is set up, January 9th, this past Monday, was the start of the spring academic cycle. So I kind of anticipated, okay, there'll be some guys that just don't show up for spring. Well, there hasn't been any announcements of that so far, and now we're towards the back end of the week. We over at Duck Territory had prepped about, I don't know, a dozen or so possible transfer portal stories, and so far none of those have really landed. So we'll see. There's still a week left. Maybe Oregon loses, or I should, yeah, maybe they have a couple players leave in the next week. Maybe they don't. But you're right that the big key will be right after spring ball in May of how many players leave, who leaves, and kind of how that reshapes your roster.
NFL draft decisions are out there as well. That deadline's on January 16th. Is anybody else out there that we're waiting word from?
Not that I'm aware of. It's such a weird thing. So they've had two players enter a year early. Neither were really surprising. Christian Gonzalez, who a lot of mocks have as a first round pick, top 20 draft pick. He was, I think, so again, as I mentioned earlier with Birch, he was the 1 year kind of rental player from Colorado, comes out, was your best defensive player, took off. I think that was pretty expected. And then same thing with Noah Sewell, who had frankly probably his worst year was his final season at Oregon. Statistically it was, and I think from an impact perspective, it felt like it was. So kind of didn't maybe leave on the high note you'd hoped he would, but at the same time, 3 great years, was a very quality player. I think Oregon fans will remember him very fondly. Figuring out who else might enter is kind of, again, it's a weird situation with that because they do have players that in theory could decide they want to conclude their college careers because they've just been at Oregon and they'd be going into their fifth or sixth seasons next year. But none of those players, to me at least, strike me as like, okay, that's probably a player that really gets drafted above the last couple of rounds. So I don't think there's really a whole lot left there. This might be one of the more quiet draft days from an Oregon perspective. I think again, Gonzalez will go in the first round based upon all the projections, and then Sewell's probably maybe a third to fifth round pick somewhere in that range, I would imagine. And after that, you've got some guys that are capable, maybe being picked, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 3 to 4 Ducks that are taken in total, and that's kind of the extent of it.